Being out in nature can be beautiful and awe-inspiring. But when we immerse ourselves in nature, especially in wooded areas away from civilization, we must take into account the risks we face. These areas are home to wild animals, some of which might not be welcoming to strangers invading. In this story, a pack of coyotes turned on someone who was all alone and at her most vulnerable, with no way of fighting back. Taylor Josephine Stephanie Lucio was a beautiful and incredibly talented young woman with a bright future ahead of her. She was born in Canada and was an aspiring country folk singer. Taylor was only in her mid-teens when she started seriously thinking about basing her career in music. She majored in musical theater and gave herself the stage name Taylor Mitchell. She soon became famous for her beautiful voice and her skilled guitar playing. Taylor wasted no time jump-starting her career and released her very first album titled For Your Consideration in March of 2009. It included 10 tracks and was received very well. Many people enjoyed the fact that Taylor's voice sounded as if it was from a different generation. The album really got Taylor's name out there, and in June of 2019, the teen was invited to perform at a music festival in Winnipeg. This would help her promote her album. Taylor agreed to attend and ended up going on a concert tour. After the Winnipeg Festival, Taylor later performed in the settlement of Lucasville. After this festival, she had some time to kill before her next concert, which was scheduled in Sydney. She was someone who was very passionate about the environment, and she decided that she wanted to spend this extra time going on a solo nature walk through Cape Breton Highlands National Park. The day she set off on her trip, on a beautiful sunny afternoon on October 27, 2009, at around 2:45 p.m., Taylor crossed paths with an American couple while on the Skyline Trail. They were going the opposite direction of her. For some reason, Taylor ultimately decided to cut her hike short. She turned around and began making her way back to her car. It's suspected that Taylor may have noticed that coyotes were stalking her and determined that she was in danger. Coyotes were making their presence known to others that were in the park that day. Around 3:02 p.m., another American couple named Mike and Gail came across two very large coyotes that were coming their way. The pair moved out of the way to let the animals pass. Despite walking right by them, the coyotes didn't approach the couple, but simply continued on their way. Before they could disappear in the distance, the couple was able to snap a few pictures of them. They then hurried back on their way to the parking lot. When they later passed these images on to a natural research scientist by the name of Brent Patterson, he was surprised and disturbed by the demeanor that the animals had. They expressed no signs of fear, but instead seemed to be trying to show off their dominance to the humans in their presence. It is believed that only 6 minutes after the coyotes passed the couple, they confronted Taylor. Mark and Gail were not yet back to the car when in the distance they heard the sound of animals howling, the sounds of a woman screaming for her life. They were very disturbed, and as soon as they were able to make it back to the parking lot, they got to a telephone and reported what they had heard. At first, it was suspected that a black bear had initiated the attack, but it was later determined that it was a pack of coyotes instead. There were 4 hikers traveling together who had just arrived at the park when they also heard a woman's screams. They decided to go investigate, and after only a few minutes of walking, they began to discover items that belonged to Taylor. They found her keys first, and then a small knife that she had likely tried to use to fight the coyotes off. The further they traveled, it became clearer and clearer how dangerous the situation really was. They came across clothing that was covered in blood and ripped to pieces. The blood had soaked areas of the ground. When hikers came across a rest stop bathroom, they noticed a large amount of blood smeared all over the door, and they suspected the worst. Sure enough, at 3:25 p.m., they turned the corner and came across the disturbing sight that they had been dreading. Taylor was laying on the ground, covered in blood. A large coyote was standing over her. The hikers worked together to get the coyote to back away from the girl. They threw rocks at it and got it to retreat enough for them to approach Taylor. The coyote continued to growl and circle the group. It's believed that several coyotes were involved in the attack. When the hikers got to Taylor, they saw how vicious the attack had been. Her whole body was covered in deep bite marks. The worst were upon her head and one of her legs. Despite her serious condition and the agonizing pain she was in, Taylor was remarkably still conscious and was able to talk to the people who had rescued her. While they tried to figure out how to get Taylor the help she needed, a nature preserve officer arrived at the scene. When he saw that the coyote was still acting in a threatening way, she shot it at once with a shotgun, and the animal retreated. Paramedics rushed Taylor to a nearby hospital, and it was determined that she was in very serious condition. She ended up being airlifted to another medical center in hopes of saving her life. Unfortunately, she would later die after suffering from too much blood loss. She was only 19 years old. She was later buried in Ontario. Taylor's horrific story shocked and disturbed many. There was a lot of speculation about why the coyotes had picked Taylor to attack. Some people suspected that she tried to interact with the animals in some way, either by trying to get too close to them or by messing with a den that had babies in it. However, it is also possible that when Taylor saw the animals, she panicked and started running away. This may have prompted the coyotes to chase her. It is also suspected that these were no ordinary coyotes, but were actually rabid and a cross between a wild type of dog. This would help explain their great strength, size, and viciousness. After the attack, wardens searched the park for the coyotes that did this to Taylor. They were able to find a place where around 5 or 6 of them were living. The plan was to kill all of them so that they wouldn't be a danger to other hikers that may be passing through. However, Taylor's mom ended up intervening. She explained that her daughter knew the risks she was taking by going through that park, and she believed that Taylor would not have wanted her death to be the reason other animals were killed. However, her wish was not ultimately granted. The trail that Taylor was following was quickly closed off. A warden who was keeping watch over the area ended up shooting and killing a female coyote who appeared aggressive. Several others were killed through traps that had been set. The dead body of the large male coyote who was suspected to have taken the main role in the attack against Taylor was also discovered. It had likely died after being shot by the ranger. Taylor's life was cut short when she was still so young. However, because of the album she released, people can enjoy her beautiful music for years to come, and she will live on in music history. If you would like to check out Taylor's music, it's available on both Apple Music and Spotify.